We have many different ways of expressing and understanding the holy, and so periodically we need to take some time and talk about what it is we really are talking about when we gather in church. This past month, we've gathered in listening circles exploring this question: what is holy? What makes it so? And how do we honor the holy with our actions? Our opening words this morning are just some samplings of our definitions of the holy. The holy that we honor when we gather is the God or the love that is the center of us all. Our shared humanity and our best selves. We are the holy and put action to it. We serve each other and humanity. We honor the holy through work, social justice, and civil rights. The holy is that which takes us beyond time. It provides nourishment, interdependence, connection, and change. It shows up in unexpected ways. The holy has a feeling of intense clarity, insight, and energy beyond our thinking minds. The holy does not have all the answers, but generates a mysterious awe. The holy is something we are always trying to figure out and always coming back to. When a person or place is holy, there is an emanation of acceptance and love. The cries of babies also are.
Good morning. I'm Anne-Marie Buckland and not Amy Caballo, as it says in the order of worship. But we do seem to be sharing identities this year. The reading this morning is a retelling of a Jewish story in the words of Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. A long time ago in the northern part of Israel, in the town of Feb, the richest man in town was sleeping as usual through the Shabbat morning services. Every now and then, he would almost wake up, trying to get comfortable on a hard wooden bench, and then slip back into a deep sleep. One morning, he awoke just long enough to hear the chanting of the Torah verses from Leviticus 24, 5 through 6, in which God instructs the children of Israel to place 12 loaves of challah on a table in the ancient wilderness tabernacle. When services ended, the wealthy man woke up, not realizing that all he had heard was the Torah reading about how God wanted 12 loaves of challah. He thought that God had come to him in his sleep and had asked him personally to bring 12 loaves of challah to God. The rich man felt honored that God would single him out, but also felt a little foolish. Of all the things God would want for a person, 12 loaves of challah did not seem very important. But who was he to argue with God? He went home and baked the bread. Upon returning to the synagogue, he decided the only proper place for his holy gift was alongside the Torah, scrolls in the ark. He carefully arranged the loaves and said to God, "Thank you for telling me what you want of me. Pleasing you makes me very happy." Then he left. No sooner had he gone than the poorest Jew in the town, the synagogue janitor, entered the sanctuary. All alone, he spoke to God. "Oh Lord, I am so poor. My family is starving. We have nothing to eat. Unless you perform a miracle for us, we will surely perish." Then, as was his custom, he walked around the room to tidy it up. When he ascended the bema and opened the ark, there before him were 12 loaves of challah. "A miracle," exclaimed the poor man. "I had no idea you worked so quickly. Blessed are you, O God, who answers our prayers." Then he ran home to share the bread with his family. Minutes later, the rich man returned to the sanctuary, curious to know whether or not God had eaten the challah. Slowly, he ascended the bema, opened the ark, and saw that the challah were gone. "Oh my God," he shouted, "you really did eat my challah. I thought you were teasing. This is wonderful. You can be sure I'll bring another 12 loaves, with raisins in them too." The following week, the rich man brought a dozen loaves to the synagogue and again left them in the ark. Minutes later, the poor man entered the sanctuary. "God, I don't know how to say this, but I'm out of food again. 7 loaves we ate, 4 we sold, and 1 we gave to charity. But now nothing is left, and unless you do another miracle, we will surely starve." He approached the ark and slowly opened its doors. "Another miracle," he cried. 12 more loaves, and with raisins too. Thank you, God. This is wonderful." The challah exchange became a weekly ritual that continued for many years. And like most rituals that become routine, neither man gave it much thought. Then one day, the rabbi, detained in the sanctuary longer than usual, watched the rich man place the dozen loaves in the ark and the poor man redeem them. The rabbi called the 2 men together and told them what they had been doing. "I see," said the rich man sadly. "God doesn't really eat my challah." "I see," said the poor man. "God hasn't been baking challah for me after all." They both feared that now God no longer would be present in their lives. Then the rabbi asked them both to look at their hands. "Your hands," he said to the rich man, "are the hands of God giving food to the poor. And your hands," he said to the poor man, "also are the hands of God, receiving gifts from the rich." So you see, God can still be present in your lives, continue baking and continue taking. Your hands are the hands of God.
It's time, once again, for the annual budget drive, and thus for what is lovingly referred to as the Sermon on the Amount. I began my preparations for the sermon weeks ago, revisiting books on giving and its spiritual importance, and of course, there are many. All of them wise and full of wonderful things to tell us about why we give and why we ought to give more. This year I was struck by the chapter heading in one book in particular. The book was called Giving, the Sacred Art, Creating a Lifestyle of Generosity. And the chapter heading that caught my eye was Giving as Holy Obligation. Some of you will remember the Batman and Robin comics and television show that featured a running dialogue in which a predicament unfolded for the dynamic duo that needed their intervention. Something would happen, like an explosion at a chocolate factory, and Robin would exclaim, "Holy hot chocolate, Batman!" And they would go on to save the day. So of course, when I saw this chapter heading, part of me that is perpetually 10 years old said, "Holy obligations, Batman!" The giggling I did at that was only partly a testament to how much pop culture has corroded my brain. I was also very much in the role of Robin at that moment, realizing the depth of the predicament before me. To offer a solid theological grounding for giving while being wise and witty. And not to go on so long as to interfere with the chocolate auction, or heaven forbid, the Super Bowl. Holy obligations. The topic of giving in church, giving to church, is a touchy one. It's more complicated than looking at a budget, our own or the church's, and dividing it up into a pie. The questions of giving and church push us into realms of economic thinking beyond simple math, beyond just the here and now. They ask how the holy can be part of our giving. Many of you spent time in the last month in the listening circles I spoke of earlier, articulating for yourselves and one another what is holy. Not surprisingly, the answers were both widely varied and amazingly similar. Together, you grappled with the fact that the sacred visits us in moments that are unique to who each of us are, and also is universal in its appearance to those who open themselves up to it. For some, it had a name: God, Spirit, Truth, Love. And for some, it was moments and impressions, things beyond naming, but fully felt and deeply held. The presence of the holy, however, had not escaped anyone's notice. Like the man in this morning's story nodding off during Shabbat services, even when you were not expecting it or paying any particular attention, messages of transcendence had entered your awareness and shaped your living. We come to church, all of us, both wishing for that sense of a sacred presence in our lives and wanting it not to ask too much of us. But the importance and significance of the task of our task as people of faith, yes, even people of liberal faith, seems to break through our most distracted, most worldly thoughts, our moments of thinking we simply are not up to the task. As this morning's story reminds us, even when you're only partly listening to the message about your duties, your hands are the hands of God. Even when you're delighted for what sounds like the easiest possible way out, your hands are the hands that can offer bread to those in desperate need. And on the other side of the equation, when you're feeling hopeless and afraid to ask for human help, a miracle may arrive. And when it does, yours are the hands of God taking what's offered and finding comfort and nourishment. Even when you realize that there was no supernatural miracle that took place, no personal deity that was managing the transaction, there has indeed been a holy exchange. Something transcendent has connected the pieces of the puzzles of our lives. This Wednesday morning, I looked out from this pulpit onto a full sanctuary. Wednesday morning. And when I say full, I mean full. Every single seat was taken, every pew was filled, the choir loft was overflowing. People of all ages had come to pay their respects after the tragic death of Dante Fugazzotto, a young man who grew up in this community and died suddenly at the age of 25. It was a sad, sad day. Sunlight streamed in the windows much as it is now, and landed on the casket and the surrounding flowers. And as I sat looking on the congregation, I was visited once again by something that washes over me profoundly from time to time. I was struck by the gathering of that congregation that would only be a congregation for a few hours on a single day, united by a single life. That congregation for a day was gathered here, in this sanctuary, built 223 years ago by hands of men and women of the town, and tended carefully by each generation to this day. The search committee that devoted a year or more of their lives searching for this minister to serve your congregation had no idea she would be providing this service to the larger community. Those of you who give generously each year to keep our heating on and our building clean and our staff paid didn't see this in your brochure for last year's stewardship drive. As far as I know, Dante and his family had never set foot in this church before plans began for his funeral. But they were nonetheless deeply part of this community. The intimacy of the love and the care that goes into this church and the universal that it stands for lived side by side in their depth within me at that moment. Some of the challah that had been baked over the centuries was being removed by folks who had no idea what went into making it. They just knew that it was miraculously there in their time of need. Holy obligations, friends. What did it take to make the church available then? What will it take to make sure the church is here for folks we may never meet in ways we could never anticipate? Our act of giving as holy obligations. That's what it will take. Now I know the idea of obligations in church are anathema to some of us who are proud religious liberals. Many of us fled the weighty sense of obligations in churches that we grew up in and happily landed here. We like to freely choose everything about our faith, and therefore we don't want to feel anything as a duty imposed from outside. And obligations, as we have come to understand them, are things we do out of a sense of duty or some necessity that is external to us. They're the things we are bound to do. This is the literal Latin root. Ob means to or against, and legate, to tie together, to bind. Usually we think of them as onerous, or at least annoying chores that, if we had our choice, we simply would not do. Taking out the garbage, standing in line at the registry of motor vehicles, unloading the dishwasher. Pretty much anything that you wish your spouse or housemate or mother would do before you got to it. We may have come to define obligations as a narrow band of things that are unpleasant chores, things that we should minimize in our lives if we are to really flourish and value our freedom. But really, the biggest parts of our lives are spent in actions that bind us to something or someone else. The biggest parts of our identity are built around those actions, our obligations. Usually we don't enter into them with the fullest awareness of what we're getting ourselves into. We fall in love and commit ourselves to another, and then realize that life with a partner is much more, how are we going to get the gutters clean, than longing glances over candlelight dinners. We make the decision to have children with visions of adorable, cuddly babies in a house full of life. And we get that, along with dirty diapers and rides to lessons and sports and nail biting over late nights out. We start a job or a career, excited about all the ways we'll be challenged and might grow and flourish in it, and still some days showing up to work is not even close to the top of the list of things we'd like to do. And yet, when we're asked who we are, we respond with what we do for a living. When we say what's important to us, most of us would answer, family. Our obligations and how we live them shape who we are and who we want to be. I'm going to go out on a limb for a moment and say that most of us, indeed, though we might have many names for it, come to church for a connection with the holy. We want to connect with the deepest part of ourselves and the largest sense of the source of all life. We want to connect with neighbors who are doing the same searching, and we want to hear how it's going for them. We want to be here for each other. Few of us, I would say, come consciously seeking another obligation in our lives. Many of us, when we hear that word obligation in church, want to hide our heads and run for the hills. Being told you're obligated to give in church is about as unholy a feeling as many of us want to have. But guess what I'm about to do? We have every bit of evidence from the rest of our lives that our relationships that include obligations are the ones that mean the most. The friendships that are truest are the ones that have been fused through trips to the emergency room, or the loss of a parent, or the heartbreak of divorce. They test who we are. They help us to grow into who we want to be in unexpected ways. We aren't really parents the moment a child is born. We become parents over the course of nighttime feedings and paying for orthodontia and struggling over homework. My friends, there is no way to connect, to be bound to the holy that we seek in our spiritual lives without some obligation. A holy obligation binds us to all that connects us with the eternal, unnameable spirit spirit that infuses all life. Church, if it's going to be real community, if it's going to stand the test of time and carry forth the visions of the world we want to see, comes with obligations. And I know that you know this. As I look around this church community, I see us living our obligations to one another deeply and well. Gathered in small group ministries, you're reflecting deeply on your lives, bearing witness to each other's journeys, holding each other in care. In our listening circles, you reflected openly and honestly on quite unexpected questions and listened carefully to the truth as it emerged among you. Coordinated by the caring circle, you've offered meals and visits to members through many difficult times, and especially difficult times this month. Your finance committee put on a fabulous party last night so folks could dance the night away. In committee meetings, you've put new technology to work to solve the problems of draft in very old ways. You've dreamed up new possibilities for worship and social action. You've welcomed newcomers and planned programs for children. These have all been acts of giving as holy obligation, binding ourselves to the eternal spirit that's unnameable. Our obligations have helped us grow into the people that we want to be. Deeply connected, more deeply caring, stretching our own comfort zones and discovering how much more we are and can be. We do a great job with this level of obligation. We show up, we work hard, we enjoy one another's company. I think everyone I've talked with about the way they give themselves to this church community has said the same thing to me. The more you give, the more you grow. The more you learn about yourself and others, the more you feel connected and fully part of things. You don't always want to, of course. There are nights when dragging yourself out to a committee meeting or a small group or a listening circle is the last thing you want to do. And yet, when you return home, that connection is deepened. Who you are has been enlarged. As we enter into this stewardship drive, you will be offered information about our budget, how much it takes to keep our operations running each year. You'll know what it takes to get the orders of worship printed and keep the roofs from leaking and keep the organ and piano in tune and all of the other stuff that we pay real dollars for. And you'll also know what's in your own bank account and what you expect to find there in the coming year. And it may be a lot less than you wish. But the real question before us as we enter this time of stewardship is, what would it look like to make our financial giving a holy obligation in the best sense of both of those words? What do we need to give in order to be transformed by our giving to church? How shall we offer a gift that has the potential to make the connection between who we are now and who we wish to be, both as individuals and as a community, and that in the process connects us with the Spirit and life itself? We tell all members that as a self-sustaining community, we rely on each other to be fully involved, both personally and financially. No one sets your level of commitment for you. But what we know from the stories of our members is that the more you give, the more you do get. Not in terms of programs and services, although those are made more possible by more dollars, of course, but in terms of your own connection with that sacred spirit that resides in you, that resides among us, and ultimately is beyond any of us. This is godly work. Each time we consent to bake those loaves of bread, unsure what the point could possibly be, and find out long after that they were serving a holy purpose we didn't expect, we know God is moving through us and among us. We're preparing the way for memorial services we never could have dreamed of. We're preparing the way for action for justice that we have yet to fully envision. We're paving the way for children we will never meet to flourish and thrive in liberal religious faith. From our smallest act of worship to our grandest acts of generosity, We belong to a force of life and love that stretches back through centuries of human living and human giving. We also belong to a stream of life that continues long beyond us, far after us. And in these brief years we have on earth, it's ours to offer what we can to the transformation of ourselves and our world. This church, I am proud to say, has been the holy vessel for that movement for 3 centuries. Let us make it so for many more to come. Widening welcome, offering a sanctuary in which the comfort and the challenge of the sacred in our lives offers us healing